So welcome to the show, John.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. Just had two things that I wanted to say really quickly because I know you all are pressed for time. One is on the evolution of the biblical God that you all talked about at the very beginning of this show, how every theist has their own idea of what God is. But even if you were to go by strictly what the Bible says, and you were to read the Bible cover to cover, you would get very different ideas about Yahweh. From the Yahweh in Genesis, who is clearly not omnipotent, who is thwarted by iron chariots, who only has the strength of an ox, to the God of Paul, who is omnipotent and for whom all things are possible. And the God that Jesus said, for whom God is all things are possible. So clearly, even if you went strictly by the Bible, you would get an anthropomorphic God at the very beginning of Genesis who walks and talks and wrestles with Jacob, and at the very end, you would get a God who is more off in the spiritual realm.
The problem is that the Bible is missing the training montage that takes place between the two testaments, where God vastly increases his power through training and vitamins.
You know, my particular theory was that God was leveling up, or that Yahweh was leveling up, and at 20th level God, then that's when he got the omnipotence character ability.
Yeah, there's a really great scene out of the removed versions of the transitory books between the Old and New Testament, wherein God does these wicked one-arm push-ups, and it's very moving music in the background too.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to bring up, I had what I call a heresy hypothesis that I just wanted to bounce off you all and see what you all thought of this. RN, you had talked earlier about how religious groups tend to splinter apart over time. In some of my travels to other places, I noticed that, say, in Indonesia, the Christians there who are in the minority are not very sensitive to distinctions between Protestant and Catholic, and some of the Christians there didn't even know whether they were Protestant or Catholic, and both groups do exist in that country. Whereas, say, in this country where Christians are the majority, there the distinctions are very well known. In fact, a lot of Protestants don't consider Catholics to be truly Christian and so on and so forth. And I've also noticed that on the internet forum, which tends to be mostly atheists, that all of a sudden the Muslims and Christians who have been killing each other over in the Middle East forget their differences and they start defending one another. So my hypothesis was that as a religion becomes more dominant in a society, it's going to be more sensitive to doctrinal distinctions, more sensitive to subtle theological hair splitting, and less tolerant of them. Whereas, say, when religions are in the minority, it's more I'm okay, you're okay. As long as you're roughly in the same category that I'm in, I'm fine with your beliefs. I don't know. What do you all think of that?
Well, I think you're right in so far as the Catholic Church not being true Christians, because Venom Playing X told me they are described as the whore of Babylon. And if you do a Google search for "woman rides the beast," you'll find out all about it. But I don't recommend you put that into a Google engine. Aaron.
I've had several discussions with Christians of this type. I mean, we know statistically that if a religion has slight presence in a given place, well, then it will present itself as the most charismatic of the group. It'll be the most comely, the most attractive, and the most tolerant, seemingly the most wise. That'll be the image they want to portray. But as they gain dominance, then they start enforcing their doctrine more and more vehemently and with less and less tolerance. And this is statistically true. It doesn't matter what religion it is, I don't think. I don't think there's any exceptions to this rule once a religion has power over law. That's why atheists are so adamant over the separation of church and state. It could easily be mosque and state. It doesn't matter. We're not specifying Christianity. We're saying that no religion should have rule over law because this is the inevitable result. Theocracies have, in every instance I'm aware of, always been an automatic violation of human rights. And I think there's a number of videos that talk about nations and their crime rates, where Islam, for example, has a certain percentage of the population, and they link the crime rates related to these levels of Islamification, and how that religion is perceived in those countries. You know, are they violent? Are they dominant? Are they passive? You know, are they the ones saying that, you know, well, most Muslims wouldn't condone that kind of behavior, that sort of thing. That you only get those statements in areas where Islam has little or no power. Mm-hmm. And then you get ritual killings in places where it does have power.
Right. The upshot is really...
Can I just address your second point, which is how they have an ability to come together and forget about their differences. And I can't remember exactly what the circumstances were. It may have been in relation to blasphemy laws in the United Nations or something like that. And all these diverse religions got together to make a joint statement, which began on behalf of all the revealed religions of the world. So I think they do pack together when they need to. When they see another religion being threatened, there is a tendency for them to help each other out. I think that's what you were referring to in the second point.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for the call. And I know that your time is limited here, so I'll let you get to the next caller.
Thank you very much indeed.
John was talking about the ecumenicalism of Christianity and Islam, and DPR just mentioned it again. They stick together when faced with the threat of atheism, and I've always found this quite interesting, and I just wonder what their motive for it is, because obviously from the point of view of Islam, no other religion can be tolerated. Anyone who doesn't accept Muhammad as the last prophet of God is basically deserves to be killed. Why do they do this? Why do they stick together on this point? Is it just pure cynicism, them protecting their own fiefdom? You know,
I don't think it's protecting their own fiefdom. I think it's protecting religion in general. And if they see another religion coming under attack, they see that would happen to them in the future as well. So it's best if they all stick together and keep atheism in a minority. I suspect that's what the reason is. As I say, I can't remember the specific details of what the incident was when they all grouped together under the banner of the revealed religions of the world.
Was that the United Nations blasphemy law?
It may have been, but I can't say so with any degree of confidence.
Well, when the Crusaders were sacking Constantinople, people of all the different religions, you had the few remaining polytheists along with Muslims, Christians, and Jews all fighting against the Crusaders because the incoming Crusaders were just so violent and their pillaging and raping was so out of control. So, you know, there's an element of desperation and pragmatism that erupts when people feel that they're approaching an endgame.
They're in defense of the delusion, that's all it is. I mean, you will have Christian denominations rally together when it becomes apparent that Islam is going to overtake them, eclipse the Christian denominations. But before then, until that time, you will have Protestants saying that Catholics aren't true Christians, until they realize that Catholicism accounts for more than half of all Christianity, and that if it wasn't for the Catholics, then the Christians would be the third largest religion in the world, not the second. Then they start to, and the second wouldn't be a Christian denomination, wouldn't be Catholicism either. So then they'll rally together to defend Christianity as a whole, then they will defend the Abrahamic religions as a whole. But when you get something like atheism, then all of the religions, at least the dogmatic ones, will rally together for the freedom of their delusion.
How do you feel about it when it's in the United States, for example, with evangelicals sticking up for the rights of Muslims to build mosques, for example? Isn't that surely they know that to maintain their religious parity, they need to reinforce each other and other, for their tax breaks and for all the other advantages they have in society.
Well, you're in the UK?
Actually, I'm in Canada.
Oh, okay. I'm
Same
sorry.
thing.
Because I thought when you're saying, when you're talking about alliances between Christians and Muslims, in the UK, I understand that's happening more and more often because Christianity in the UK is shrinking, Islam is growing, so I think that there's a convenient political alliance to be made there. In the US, evangelical Christians don't feel that they need Muslims to win their battles, so they really treat them quite disdainfully.
Yeah, I think in fact
shaking your head. Have you got a point to make, Lisa? Sorry, you started. Do carry on.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think in fact I've seen some atheists align themselves with Muslims, and I think that is in part because in the United States the religious right really is just Christianity, and so I think that there is a fear, there's a growing realistic fear of America becoming more of a theocracy, more of a Christian theocracy. And so I think when atheists see Christian groups going against other religious groups like Muslims, I think that there is a tendency for us to want to stand with the minority religious group, just to remind the Christians that in fact while they might be the most dominant or the largest, they are not the only ones. So I think that there's actually some alliances that you see between even atheists and other religious groups.
I think that what atheism has said just now is a good point. I'm thinking back to the, what was his name? The Archbishop of Canterbury a couple of years ago, Dr. Rowan, I forget his name, but
William.
He was Williams. That's right. Yeah, he was almost advocating Sharia law for Muslims in the UK, wasn't he? And I found that extremely strange. But if it's a matter of survival, for a shrinking Church of England in the face of growing Islam, then that would explain that. Could I raise a point about
it was an
intelligent
unfortunate statement that you made, but we'll leave Sharia law for the moment. So you had another point to go on.
Yeah, just on the issue of intelligent design. I sometimes think that we as atheists allow the theists to get away with too much. We let them use language and terms that sound impressive and convincing to people who haven't given matters much thought. And this whole intelligent design issue is a good example of that to me. The concept of design may seem plausible to someone who's uneducated in science or biology, but design itself is an abstract process that can take place in a mind or it's conceptual. Why do we allow them to concentrate on the design aspect? How about the actual manufacturing, if you like, the actualization of the design? Where's the workshop? Where are the tools? Where did the materials come from? And allowing them to get away with design, we never forced the issue of the poof into existence, as Concordance said. And when you think of it in those terms, it becomes more ridiculous. Yes, design, I can see how people may find design a plausible explanation, but as soon as you focus on where did the manufacturing come from, I think then you really do put the ball back in their court.
I think one of the problems with the Design Institute is that, and intelligent design, is that they tend to avoid that question, because what they try and do is completely lie and deceive you about who the designer is. They claim it isn't really God, although we all know it is. So I think if they're pushed on that issue, they would probably withdraw into that defensive shell of, oh no, we're not saying it's God, we don't know what happened. All we can say is there's some sort of intelligent design. I imagine that that's what they would say. Anyone else got a view on this?
I've said mine.
Well, if only we were able to strike things from their vocabulary. I mean, what really irritates me is this sort of the philosophical or self-styled philosophical theists who are notorious for throwing out vocabulary words which are long, and then when you ask any follow-up question, as with so many other different kinds of arguments and tactics used, it makes it pretty clear that they themselves don't know what these terms mean. I mean, the most notorious culprit for me is epistemological. You know, I've heard that, you know, some more sophisticated, you know, raising their pinky finger when they drink their tea kind of philosophical Christians say, well, you have to do your epistemology first. And then I say, okay, well, let's lay down some ground rules to make sure that we're using the same definitions and we're talking about the same things. And they say, no, you didn't hear it. We have to lay down our epistemology first. And I'm like, you idiot, what do you think epistemology is if you don't want to work through our understanding of what knowledge and facts are before we proceed? They have no clue what the term means. They just throw it out there as a verbal smokescreen. And I think that those are even worse. You know, a lot of these guys, let's face it, aren't very bright, aren't very thoughtful, aren't very imaginative, and often they cut and paste terminology that they don't have the slightest clue what the significance is. It's just in the hopes that, it's just underestimating your opponent, pure and simple, in the hope that they won't know what you're talking about. I
think they're known as pseudos. But Michael, you're quite keen on the philosophical type of argument.
Yeah.
We've talked about it on previous shows. What's your view of the idea of philosophy playing any part in the proof of the existence of a God?
Well, philosophy is generally, like, I would say, the most abstract and theoretical framework of any type of knowledge, be it science, be it ethics, be it politics or law. So we have disciplines of philosophy devoted to any one of these topics. And we would have a genuine philosophy of religion, and in fact, even it's sort of what atheists are doing most of the time. They are implanting a type of epistemology. But what I think apologists do, so like the likes of William Lane Craig, and increasingly the likes of Venom Fangax as well, are that in the search for truth, philosophers have come up with a number of incredibly forceful distinctions and powerful ways of arguing that are incredibly convincing and incredibly useful in identifying errors in arguments. The apologist is essentially taking these tools out of context of what they were originally used to do, and then using them basically in a purely instrumental way in order to back a particular belief system. And I find it, as someone who really enjoys and takes a lot of pleasure in trying to find the truth, I think it's absolutely revolting to see the way that they take these tools that, again, I think are fundamentally meant to increase our knowledge and in order to find in a genuine sense what the truth is on any matter, and then use them to basically shore up their religious convictions. I think that's all it is. Like, Atheismo gave the example of... Go ahead.
We're finished.
Well, I was going to say that you gave the example of epistemology, and like the term epistemology, and theists are like the example that you gave, that they say that you need to do your epistemology first. Like, they're right about that. Like, you do sort of need some sort of framework on which you can have the rest of the discussion. But then you're also right in saying that once it gets into exactly how you do epistemology, they have very little to actually say.
When they bring up the term epistemology, it's usually to interrupt and negate my attempts at epistemology, which just goes to show they have no clue what the word actually means. Because I'll be in the middle of talking with them and saying, okay, let's make sure we have the same definitions of knowledge, of fact, of this and that. And it's at that point that they decide, oh no, before we do our epistemology, we have to do our epistemology. Which just goes to show they have no clue what they're talking about. It's just a smokescreen. Here's another bad one, the so-called ontological argument, okay? Now, this is from the Princeton website. This is their nutshell of, this is their distilling of the ontological argument, okay? Therefore, if that than which nothing greater can be conceived exists in the understanding alone, The very being than which nothing greater can be conceived is one that than which a greater can be conceived. But obviously this is impossible. Hence there is no doubt that there exists a being than which nothing greater can be conceived. And it exists both in the understanding and reality. Now, I've heard people drop the term, oh, well, you can't counter the ontological argument. I dare any of them to put that into their own words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, actually, one of the most famous Christian philosophers recently, like the hero of William Lane Craig, Alvin Plantinga, basically took, in I think the 1970s, there was an incredibly brilliant philosopher who's at City University of New York right now, who, when he was at the age of 19, basically invented a new form of logical analysis that could capture more of the truths of mathematics and logic. Alvin Plantinga then took modal logic out of the context of discussing mathematics and argumentation theory and used it to make a new form of the ontological argument. That it was a copy-paste into a different, basically, programming language. And those are the types of contributions that you get from these people.
When you really strip away the way that they choose to phrase it, it's basically saying that it's discounting the ability of the human mind to envision a paradox without malfunctioning somehow, which is it's saying, well, this is a being that's so great it can't be contained by your imagination alone. It's too great to be only conceptual. That's the argument, which is ridiculous because we can envision. There's that old question: Can Jesus has these powers? Can he microwave a burrito so hot that even he can't eat it? Human beings can envision paradoxical things without any issue at all if we just don't stop for a moment and comb out the different problems with it.
Yeah, it's actually a central method of philosophy to show that if your concepts are incompatible with each other, then there's something wrong with your concepts. If there are genuine paradoxes, then something has to go. That's one of the most central parts. And you're right, they're basically throwing out the idea that that's even possible to do.
It's trivial to disprove these paradoxes, though. I mean, the simple example of the arrow never reaching the target because it has to travel half the distance.
Oh, Zeno's paradox?
Yeah, Zeno's paradox, exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I don't understand the type of mind that is impressed by those arguments. It's like Kalam as well, the dismissal of or the assumption of a premise or the dismissal of a certain premise, in depending on how it suits. Maybe that's just a physiological aspect of a believer's brain that then becomes manifest when they get their holy book in their hand and pick and choose throughout that. I don't know. Perhaps this is something that
I think you've opened up a new avenue of discussion that could take us a long time to get through. And I've got two more people that I am going to try desperately to fit on. So can I thank you very much for the call?
Can I just make one very quick, just on the intelligent design? Leonardo da Vinci was mentioned, and I always laugh at this because he invented the helicopter. Well, he drew pictures of a sort of a screw, a water wheel, for the air. Water wheels already existed, so all he did was take the idea of a water wheel and transfer it to air. And when it's claimed that was an invention, it makes me laugh. I always think of the movie Envy with Jack Black. I don't know if you've seen that movie, where they invent a little spray can called Vaporize that gets rid of dog turds, And when asked how it works, he explains, well, it's just a spray can and you spray it on and it makes the turd disappear, To me, that's as impressive as as Leonardo da Vinci's helicopter or any of the intelligent design argument.
A good note to leave it on. Intelligent design and